I'm sure you've heard the news. The New South Wales selective exam was on the 9th of May 2024, and boy, was it interesting. I'll be breaking today down my biggest insights from the exam and my immediate reaction for students and parents to benefit from in the future. Let's get into it. This year's exam was the last year in which it was done on paper. From 2025 onwards, it will still be done by Cambridge Assessment, but it was done in an online assessment format in conjunction with Janison Education's online platform. This year, we also know it is more competitive than any other year. There were reportedly 18,544 students who did the exam in 2024 this year. This is approximately more than 2,000 than in previous years, which really shows that it is a really competitive exam and more people are looking to get into selective high schools compared to private schools or even the local schools. In another video, I'll break down the likelihood of making it in this year's exam due to the probability by going and analyzing the numbers. After the test on the 9th of May, as well as the 10th of May, I spent my time speaking and calling different parents that did tutoring with us for this particular exam. If you're a student with Biggs Academy, you already know how much detail I can gather, and generally students and parents alike can get a lot of insight from my course. This gives us both a good opportunity to see how the student may have performed, and this can shape their expectations as well as change or even modify some selective school choices. Through these conversations, I discovered 3 main takeaways that I believe all students have to know in the future. Let's get into it. If you did the exam this year or browsed through the YouTube or Facebook groups, the overwhelming consensus was that the maths test was comparatively much more easier compared to previous exams or sample tests that have been given in the past. This was not only from the maths topic source, which was of an easier difficulty, but also the complexity of questions overall seemed to be a lot more straightforward. Questions were generally shorter and did not have tricks that were evident in previous years that helped differentiate between the stronger and weaker students. There were some questions that did take a bit more time, but on a whole, the students I spoke to generally did not have to guess any of the questions. If you did the exam and had to do complete guesses, it would have to depend on the number, but it would be quite concerning if you had to guess more than 3 questions based on the feedback that I had from the students. Unless the questions that you did attempt were largely all correct and you only had to guess those 3. Otherwise, it could be looking a little grim. When speaking to students, they would tell me that they were confident after the exam and the test was extremely straightforward and not difficult at all. Although if you have been watching my channel and reading the comments, parents and students should know that it's not all about the raw score or how high a student achieves in a certain exam. It is all depending on their school choices and how they compare to the other students doing the exam who are also aiming for the same schools. Obviously, with more students doing it this year, it makes it more competitive even if the student, in essence, may have scored pretty well. If the average mark in the mathematical reasoning exam is 80%, anyone getting less than 79% will be in the bottom 50%, and this will be reflected in the results. This is despite knowing that 79% sounds like a really good result. When basically all of our students have told us that this section was simple, there will unfortunately be a proportion of students who may not get as high as they would have liked or would have expected because this exam will have a very high average. So please do not be disappointed if you're in this particular situation. It's a great lesson to learn from, and in fact, if the test was harder, it would make it easier for students to come to terms with how they performed. However, imagine if you only made 5 mistakes. If most people only made 3 mistakes and got those 3 questions wrong, and overall had fewer questions incorrect, then you would not get an ideal result in maths. In order to get into a higher ranked selective high school, maths is going to be undoubtedly a crucial component. When it comes to the reading portion of the test, students generally found the first half of the exam more difficult than the latter half. Specifically, the first part being the reading comprehension was difficult to understand the meaning of some parts. In addition, the questions had answer options that made it difficult, as some required more implicit referencing and deeper critical understanding. Students that were typically stronger still found this to be fine though. For the poem regarding an alien, some students also found parts of it difficult to understand. Although the questions didn't really give some clarity on the overall message, students generally had to reread sections of the poem to ensure they knew what was going on. The closed passage section and extracts were straightforward for the majority of the students that I spoke to, and they did not find it very difficult at all. In fact, some students found these sections to be quite easy. Time management was not really an issue, and I think the average would be a bit higher than expected here as well, but it wasn't as easy to the point as maths. The thinking skills test, on the other hand, was resoundingly more difficult and was the hardest component relative to the other tests based on the feedback that I received. It had a fairly even split of questions, as we expected, across logical reasoning, problem solving, and spatial reasoning questions in thinking skills. Compared to previous year's exams, the thinking skills test was about the same level, but it wasn't necessarily more difficult than that. It was challenging enough for it to be likely to make the examiners have an easier time to differentiate between the very top students and the more average students, but it wasn't so difficult to the point that it really stressed everyone out. This is likely going to be a common trend moving forward, as thinking skills is worth 35% compared to other sections. So in future years, the likelihood of the thinking skills test to be harder will continue again, if I had to, I guess. So students are going to be actively looking to perform much better in this section, since it's worth 35% compared to other sections that are worth less, such as maths and reading, which is worth 25%, or even writing, which is worth 15%. If they had the choice. For writing, it was a newspaper report. I won't need to break this down line by line, as I'll be making a completely separate video on this, as there's a lot to deep dive into. Instead, from a holistic point of view, it was pretty simple for those who were adequately prepared. All of our students that we taught at Bings Academy that I spoke to were confident, especially as it is a text type that they have already given before. A few years ago, they also gave a newspaper report for Chaos on the Beach, which I've broken down on this channel too. So check it out if you haven't already. If students know the text type and its conventions, a bulk of the marks can already be received if they follow it appropriately. Students who fail to know this will likely struggle, as most of our students were already across this, and I imagine any student who went to any reputable tutoring center would have had similar style of this question as well. As a result, I believe this would have been a pretty high average, similarly to the mathematical reasoning portion of selective, which was pretty easy. If I had to guess from a raw score perspective for writing, it might hover around the 18 or 19 out of 25 in order to get above the 50% percentile. So if you're really aiming for the top 10% or top 25% sections in this writing, most likely you're going to have to get in the 22 or higher in terms of a raw score. As a result, there could be a few people who left this exam feeling very good or satisfied about this exam, but as the question was quite predictable, they could have had a bit of a shock when the results come out. Fortunately though, the writing component was worth 15%, which is higher than when it was only worth 10% in the old selective exam more than 4 years ago, but still, it's the least amount of weighting in the newer 2024 format that is still being done by Cambridge Assessment with only 15%. In terms of time management, most students that I spoke to did not struggle with this, and they were going to be able to get close to 2 complete pages. The little tricks of the questions, some students were able to pick it up, but not all the students were able to pick up all of the little components that needed to be addressed. In terms of the specifics, as mentioned, I'll break it down into a future video, so keep an eye out for it soon. In conclusion, we know that this year's exam was more competitive than any other year that they've ever done the New South Wales Selective High School Test. The test itself was by no means the hardest, but based on the feedback, but 18,544 students is a ton of students, as there's basically the same number of selective spots each and every single year. We know that the maths exam, or the mathematical reasoning exam in 2024, was considerably the easiest exam for nearly everyone who was serious about the test. And we know thinking skills was challenging and reading was moderately difficult, but not super hard. Writing was a newspaper report, so students who were prepared already were very comfortable with this text type, and it'll weed out those with little to no preparation if they weren't aware of what is required in a newspaper report. but the majority of students should already know this by the time they do the selective exam. If you like these insights, or you did this exam, or you disagree with some points, let me know down in the comments below. If you have a topic that you want me to break down, put it down there as well. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.